The 8th of March marks the International Women's Day, and this day, the Zimbabwe Human Rights Monitors platform brings you this special edition of Into Zimbabwe, where we're going to be discussing the role of women's political participation in effecting democratic change in Zimbabwe. And to discuss this, I am joined by Namatai Kwekweza, who's going to help me to discuss this issue. Namatai, thanks for joining me.
Thanks very much for having me.
So kindly introduce yourself to the viewers.
Okay, that's fine. Hi, everybody. My name is Namatai Kwekweza, and I work with We Lead Trust, which is basically a youth leadership development and advocacy organization. I'm also very much a feminist and a firm believer in the rights and participation of women and girls.
So let's get right into this. So we are celebrating, or we are commemorating International Women's Day. What's your perspective of women's general participation in development processes in Zimbabwe?
Thanks very much for the question. So in terms of the participation of women, we must understand that women do participate in development processes in general in our country. I think the major issues have been around women actually assuming leadership roles, because we want women to participate at all levels, at all different levels of development, and particularly to not just participate as the people who are in the background, who are cooking for everyone, cleaning after everyone, but also the people who are responsible for shaping the agenda, for shaping the discourse, and also the people who are actually leading in decision-making processes. So I think one of the things that we often talk about at our organization is how sometimes it's a pyramid. And when you are at the base and at the bottom, you will always have a lot more women and a lot more youth. This is where all the dirty work happens, the organizing, all the trivial work. As you move up, there are less and less women and there are less and less young people. You only have men who are much older, who are making decisions, who are deciding what the future will look like. And I think as long as we only allow women to participate at the very base of processes, it's not going to build a sustainable future, because those women will have to live in a future that has been designed by typically men and in places where they actually had no access and influence.
Okay, so you know, even just by looking, you see that a lot of women participate, you know, during campaigns. They are, maybe we can safely say that they are used as campaign gadgets. But when it comes to assuming leadership and leadership roles, as well as decision-making roles, then we don't find women there. So are there frameworks in place, you know, in our country to ensure or to help enhance women's participation?
Okay, great question, and very, very accurate observation. So definitely, there are frameworks. Legal frameworks that start off at international level. I mean, the United Nations as the Security Council Resolution on Women, Peace and Security at 1325, right?
Okay.
And Zimbabwe, you know, is a part of all of that. You also have at the African Union level, you also have at SADC level. You also have, you know, the Beijing conference that happened in the 90s. All of these things are things that Zimbabwe has participated and has endorsed. And as you move close to home and our very own constitution, you know, Section 56 of our constitution speaks on those aspects around equality, around non-discrimination, around gender parity, right? So it's all there legally. And I always don't just want to talk about this in a political context, but to look at all those other rights that our constitution and also our laws have actually made possible for women, right? We also have to look at the legal precedents, right? If you look at the Magaya versus Magaya case in the 90s that talked about property and inheritance, right? That put women and men at an equal footing in terms of inheritance. We look at laws around you know, sexual assault, around rape that have been put in place mostly to protect women, and particularly women and girls. We look at laws around child marriages. We look at laws around, because they affect young women, right? We look at all those laws, and most recently we look at the anti-sexual harassment bill. You know, you look at all of these are mechanisms and instruments that are being put in place or already have been put in place. And in case law, we have legal precedents that has been empowering women. So I would actually say that in terms of the legal frameworks, in terms of the laws around how to protect women, socially, economically, politically, Zimbabwe has done relatively better than a lot of countries, though we still have room for improvement and opportunities to actually ensure that we secure the rights of women, not just politically, but in every other infrastructure and fabric that can also support women to participate politically. So the one thing I always say is if women are not emancipated economically, they cannot thrive politically. If women are not emancipated socially, they cannot thrive politically. So all these legal frameworks that are not just speaking into the political issues, but are also speaking into all these other issues that affect a woman before she decides, to enter a place of decision making and governance and politics and policy. All of these other legal instruments are just as important in terms of what a woman gets after a marriage dissolves, or custody issues, or what kind of marriage there is. And we realize that in all the social fabric, the economic fabric, in as much as the laws might be there, women have been significantly prejudiced over the years, and this also inhibits their participation politically, because they're failing to have certain kinds of access and also certain kinds of support socially and economically, even environmentally. So I think that as we have this discussion, we must understand that there is a whole economy and a whole system of infrastructure that we have to build first and strengthen before we can actually think about women making it in politics, and particularly in a way that they do not have to be abused. Because when you're economically emancipated, people can't abuse you. They can't abuse you because you have your own money. So these are some of the issues that then, might seem trivial, but in the long run, they actually contribute towards less and less women showing up for leadership, decision-making, and governance here.
So you've mentioned that Zimbabwe is a signatory of international and regional laws, as well as our constitution is there, to make sure that maybe women are emancipated. But let's get practical. Let's talk about, the Zimbabwean environment, the political environment. In recent weeks, we've seen a lot of things happening on the political scenes, the violence in Kwekwe and all around the country. These things that are happening on the ground, are they maybe affecting, women's participation in politics and in development processes?
Great, thanks very much for that. So definitely, the political landscape, it's not just a Zimbabwean problem, but I think it's a global issue. But I think in Zimbabwe it takes a very special twist because of the nature of our politics. Mm-hmm. So we must understand that in the context of women's participation, we must feminize our political parties. We must feminize institutions of governance. We must use feminist principles in the context of women showing up for leadership. And I'm always against the group of people that say it is the responsibility of women and women alone to organize, to ensure that other women are in places of leadership, decision-making, and governance, right? It's not the responsibility of women alone, it is the responsibility of everyone, including men, to ensure that the political landscape significantly tilts in such a manner that women are able to meaningfully and effectively participate. So we just want to analyze the situation that women face. So we understand that women will experience violence, men will experience violence as what happened in Kwekwe, right? Mm-hmm. But we understand that violence, affects men and women differently. We must understand that. Mm-hmm. We must understand that women will experience violence in all its diverse forms before they are able to participate. And patriarchy is the huge instigator of that particular violence. We must understand that when you look at a woman, she will experience social violence. She will experience cultural violence. She will experience economic violence, systemic violence, structural violence, political violence, psychological violence, emotional violence, simply because they are daring to speak out and to show up for leadership and to make decisions and to be that woman, that is always there in places where decisions are being made. And the unfortunate reality about this is that these are issues that men don't have to sometimes experience simply because they are men. So for a woman, the moment you are in front speaking, people want to know, are you married? Who are you dating? And these behaviors, mind you, are not just behaviors we see, in ZANU-PF. We also see them in the opposition parties, amongst their many names and colors that they go with. These are basically instrumentalized tools that are being used and weaponized against women to deter them from participating. And what we then understand is that it creates an economy where the most aggressive, the most resilient, and particularly the most well-resourced women are the only ones that are able to make it. Because as women, we significantly need more resources to buffer us from all this violence that will be happening around us. So I think it's very, very important for us to be in a position where we call this out, and particularly from movements that say that they advance democracy. We need to actually have democracy, because democracy is not just about those who govern, it is about the governed. Democracy is not just about the powerful and the strong, it is also about the weak and the vulnerable. It is not about man only, it is about everyone else who is not a man. So we must be in a position where we actually inquire to say that why is it that when it comes to leadership, decision-making and governance processes, even parties that propagate democracy would then say, no, here we are using a cultural approach where a woman is less than a man. No. You do that with, your family at home, if that's what they're comfortable with. But in places where we have to influence policies, right, that are going to govern everybody, women and men alike, it's important to ensure that there is diversity and representation, because men cannot make good policies around women's issues because they have never lived the life of a woman. They are not women. And this is why significantly over the years, we have witnessed that issues around menstrual health, issues around childbearing, issues around like what happens in maternity wards, those issues are not being addressed, and women consistently continue to die while giving birth because you're not building the infrastructure, because men will never prioritize giving resources there because it's not an issue that affects them directly. So it's very, very important for us to look at all these elements that surround women who are in leadership. I think I'll just end it also with issues around, sexualized violence. Sexualized violence, like, when women get abducted, arrested, sometimes they get raped if they're participating. When women are posting whatever they're posting on social media, sometimes they're immediately labeled sluts and, all of that. People wanting to, use and weaponize all of that against women. So as a woman, I think in leadership, it becomes very uncomfortable because women are then put in a situation where they have to be perfect and they can't date anyone and they can't, make their own choice and decisions. Women are put consistently in situations where if they want to really thrive and make it professionally and also politically, they have to not be married, they have to have no children, because what man would actually understand and support a woman who is leading and making decisions? So I think it's very important that we speak into all these different forms of violence that are so complexly interwoven, but have basically ensured that women are disadvantaged when it comes to issues of their participation.
Yes, great points you're raising there. Even national fiscal policies like the national budget itself, it kind of puts women's issues at the back seat. And, people usually say that women do not support other women. And do you think that those few women who are in leadership positions are actually doing enough to make sure that, other women come up or they participate?
Okay, that's fine. So I wanted just to say this. I think that women don't support other women is also a very patriarchal. We have to look at this for what it is. It's something that's very patriarchal. I'm here today because I've been supported by other women and also by other men who are allies to the women's movement and who believe that young women like me should have a voice and should lead, right? And I think this whole business, like I said at the first of my presentation, where people think that it is the responsibility of women and women only to elevate another woman is absolutely nonsensical. It is the responsibility of everyone, including the men. And we must understand that all of these narratives are being propagated by patriarchy that now has its own clients amongst other women. We call them the patricias, who also advance patriarchy. So while I will say that, it will be a prerequisite that a woman will not be elected simply because they are a woman, by the mere virtue that they are a woman, right? They have to have skill sets, they have to be good at what they do. If they, the skill sets that are needed for that particular role, they have to have them. I absolutely agree. But I wanted just to put emphasis that we should not then make the standard extremely high because we are talking about a woman, and then we lower the standards because we are talking about a man. There are a lot of men who are uneducated, who do not even speak well, who are rowdy, who don't even have the skill sets. But simply because they are men, they find themselves in leadership. There are a lot of women who are exactly the contrary. They are great leaders, well-spoken, they're just amazing at what they do, but they will not find themselves in places of leadership simply because they're women. So we must be in a position where we interrogate this, because that's what patriarchy does. Patriarchy awards men opportunity simply because they are men. It awards men of lesser talent, lesser skill sets opportunity, where a woman of better talent and skill set should have been there. But simply because they're a man, they will find it easier to access, and women who could probably do a better job, find it very difficult to access. So some of those reasons around women supporting other women, I absolutely agree. Women must organize for that. And as women, we must know that we will not just support you simply because you're a woman.
True that.
I absolutely agree with that. But I think we mustn't, put it in a situation where it is only the responsibility of women. It is high time that we have men who are also able to stand with women and say, well, she's a great woman. She will do the job right, and we are okay being led by her. Because I think that as long as we have the situation where we say, because they're women's issues, women should deal with them, when they're affecting society in its broader context, that whole narrative is very weird and also very wrong. So I think these are my biggest reflections with regards to that, but also it has a very strong, patriarchal undertone and patriarchal connotation. I think I'll just end it there by saying that some of the issues around women not supporting other women are hinged on patriarchal grooming and patriarchal socialization. In a patriarchal society, women are not taught to actually support other women because it serves to benefit the men. Women are taught to compete for men. Women are taught to compete against each other. And these are some of the issues that are actually there. Women are taught to look down on the other woman and to not see value in the other woman. And these things are basically propagated by patriarchy because it is the divide and rule. So as long as we're not getting along and we are not talking to each other and supporting each other, at the end of the day, we all lose and patriarchy wins. So I think these are some of the issues that we have to talk about, but also to challenge that discourse and that narrative to say who has the most to benefit from that particular narrative and who's also advancing it. So I think for now I'll end there on that issue.
Great. Zimbabwe is now in election mode. The 26th of March, we have by-elections. 2023, we have general elections. What measures do you think should be put in place to make sure that women actually rise up and, try and get in leadership positions?
Okay, so I wanted to say that they shouldn't try. They should actually get into leadership positions. So in terms of measures, I think that we need to be gradual, incremental, and realistic, right? So you have international institutions like the UN, and also I think Sweden has that, where they say, because of COVID-19, it will take us another 147 years, it's almost 150 years, before we can achieve our goal of gender equality. That's how long it's going to take. So since a generation is 30 years, right, there are generations of women, young women and girls who are going to come, and sometimes some of them are going to go, before we have achieved our objective of ensuring that there is gender equality in this world. So we must take a gradualist, collective and also intergenerational approach, and a very incremental approach, that this first batch of people will contribute this. They put in place the infrastructure. The next generation will focus on this. And the only way that can happen is when there is an intergenerational approach to it, and also feminists from different generations are interacting. They are sharing notes, they're empowering each other. They are, saying, okay, these were the gains that we got in the last 50 years. Let's defend them, let's protect them. How do we increase them so that we don't have relapses? And that also slows down in terms of what we actually want to achieve in the way of gender equality. Bringing that to the Zimbabwean context, and particularly the political context, it's very, very important for us to understand that to start having this conversation a year before elections, it's already too late. We must be in a position where we particularly deal with political parties, the ones that are receptive, but everyone in general, to be in a position where they penalize such kinds of behaviors, where they have comprehensive sexual harassment policies, and these are actually implemented. We must also be in a position where we build power amongst the young women themselves, using feminist solidarity principles and precepts, bringing young women together to show them how they can support each other, how they can participate collectively, how they can protect each other. Also training young women around, economics, and particularly being productive economically, so that they also have resources that they can actually deploy towards protecting themselves and also supporting themselves in their political careers. I wanted just to say that it's a two-pronged thing. There are environmental issues that we have to address collectively as a society, but there are also individual issues that we have to address with the young women themselves to build resilience, to build power, particularly 360-degree resilience, emotional resilience, psychological resilience, economic resilience, political resilience, social resilience, to know that since it will take us 150 years for us to achieve our gender parity, we must be in a position where we understand that there are generations of feminists, the generations of young women who are leading, who experience violence because we are not there yet. And what do? You build resilience so that whatever they withstand, whether they're being slut-shamed, success-shamed on social media, they're able to just continue. And it's really about creating supportive infrastructure and supportive fabric that allows them to be able to withstand all the adversity. So I think in a nutshell, it's very important for us to have these conversations, not just as we get closer to the election period, but as gradual and as incremental and as intergenerational as possible. So I think I'll end here for now.
In 30 seconds, Namatai, your last words to young women and women in general ahead of the elections.
Okay, great. So, register to vote, run for office, and be kind to a sister. I think kindness is a beautiful thing. Just be kind. That's all I'll say for now. Thanks.
Register to vote, and be kind to a sister. Those are Namatai's words to young women and women in general. So from myself, Karen MANZERA, the crew behind the scenes, it's goodbye for now.